Good day. The platform in question is HorrorTube. Recently, there has been considerable attention given to a Korean woman by the American media, even at the time she was a college student in her 20s. Let us commence our examination of her case, investigate the events that transpired, and provide a comprehensive analysis of the situation. Alexander Urtula is a Filipino-American of 22 years of age. Prior to his graduation from Boston College, a renowned academic institution in the United States, where he majored in biochemistry, he established himself as an exceptionally accomplished scholar while concurrently serving as a clinical researcher at Brigham Hospital. As an aside, Brigham is an incredibly renowned hospital that was positioned third globally in 2021. Alexander exemplified academic excellence. He maintained a large social circle and exerted tremendous effort in his extracurricular pursuits, as well as in his academic pursuits. He was an exceptional scholar who received numerous commendations from his instructors. Additionally, he was in a healthy relationship for 2 years. Additionally, she was Korean, May 20, 2019. It was the day of commencement at Boston College. Alexander's graduation day also coincided with the arrival of his entire family in Boston. All of them were ecstatic for their ideal son, who had already secured employment at a hospital, maintained high academic standing, and was well liked. Nonetheless, it is 8:30, which is 1.5 hours prior to the commencement of the ceremony. The family was informed of some distressing information. Dead, Alexander was discovered in a parking lot in the vicinity of the school. Upon hastening to the location, they discerned that their son must have independently leapt from the rooftop. His acquaintances were astounded, and his family was in disbelief. Suicide seemed illogical for someone who was so devoted to life and had such a certain amount of assurance for the future. He had no documented history of depression and exhibited no discernible symptoms of the disorder. Despite lacking a suicide note, he determined to take this catastrophic action. However, one individual was present at the site and witnessed the death. Inyoung, Alexander's girlfriend, was present. She was the previously mentioned Korean companion of 2 years. The day before his demise, Alexander communicated with her via text message. There appeared to be an element within it that alluded to mortality. Yu raced to save his boyfriend's life upon witnessing it. However, with a mere fraction of a second lapse in timing, Alexander fatally plunged himself from the rooftop. The companion is heartbroken upon witnessing the scene. She felt a sense of utter devastation and was overcome with remorse. As the police began their investigation into the circumstances surrounding Alexander's decision, they monitored his mobile phone, which unveiled an unimaginable horror story. Commence by reliving December 2017, which occurred precisely 2.5 years ago. Alexander was in attendance at a school-sponsored Filipino community assembly. There, he encountered Inyoung, a South Korean international student. She was a student who specialized in economics and was exceptionally reserved. She was not particularly remarkable, and those in her vicinity considered her to be a model pupil. In contrast, Alexander was extremely sociable, extroverted, and a clear leader of the group. Thus, they were diametrically opposed. Nevertheless, did their stark differences make them more attracted to one another? Immediately following a few dates, Yu and Alexander developed significant feelings for one another. Nevertheless, their fledgling romance swiftly encountered a critical juncture. Alexander was troublesome with his ex-girlfriend. Although they had ended their relationship, they remained close companions. They continued to have coffee together, eat together, and follow each other on social media despite their breakup. Despite the fact that it may seem odd to some, they claimed they were not in an inappropriate relationship. They were merely companions. There is neither more nor less. However, this may not be something that his girlfriend could comprehend. Additionally, Alexander suspected that Inyoung, his current fiancée, might be envious. He therefore deemed it unnecessary to inform her regarding his former romantic partner. However, this secrecy was short-lived. She was furious when she discovered that Alexander and his ex-girlfriend were communicating. At that moment, she initiated control over her partner. Despite his explanation of temporarily visiting an acquaintance, she would invariably inquire whether he was reuniting with his ex-girlfriend. When he and his ex-girlfriend were in the same class, she would become extremely anxious and distressed. Alexander yielded to her demands after the situation grew progressively more challenging. What precisely was it? To mutually deploy a location tracking application on mobile devices. He had anticipated that this would partially mend their relationship of trust. However, she proceeded to track his whereabouts without his prompting. She would continue to baffle him with hundreds of texts until he responded. Her nature is obsessive. Friends who frequented the same club as the couple reported that their relationship had been somewhat atypical for the better part of a year. She has been surveilling his every action, including his whereabouts, companions, and future plans. In instances where she suspects he has exhibited unusual behavior, she has resorted to aggressive and violent behavior. She would do this even more frequently when her companions were alone than when they were together. Gradually, her conduct began to dominate Alexander's existence. Furthermore, as Alexander approached her graduation, her level of control escalated significantly. She was especially concerned that he and his ex-girlfriend might encounter one another at the commencement ceremony, which she abhorred. In the 2 months preceding Alexander's demise, I combed through 75,000 of their text messages. She sent him 47,000 of them on her own initiative. Doing the math, that equates to 1,200 texts per day. Furthermore, she individually dispatched 800 of those messages. In other words, with the exception of her napping hours, she utilized her phone throughout the entire day, every day. The issue, however, is much more significant. There is something about the way she speaks that, based on their exchanges, makes it difficult to believe that this is a romantic relationship. Such are the things she says. This family and the world will be better off if you die. She was texting me similar messages. However, you do not say that to your fiancé. She continues to verbally disparage others. Dude, if that's the case, go kill yourself. Experts later determined, through analysis of the video, that she possessed absolute control over him. She repeatedly forwarded him identical messages, as if to indoctrinate him, and at first threatened him with her life. If you leave, I'll die. Because of you, I desire to perish. Should you not perish, I shall. It takes only these words to break an individual's spirit. I believe that his realization that his closest romantic companion was the sender of these texts was particularly traumatic for him. Alexander would beseech him cease each instance, and the exchange would recur numerous hundred times. The following day, on April 15, 2019, she sends him this text message. How could you be so stupid? You should literally be dead. Leave me alone, go die somewhere. You're making everyone unhappy. Following the receipt of these texts, Alexander experienced an overwhelming sense of tension. I once sought assistance from a friend because my relationship with my girlfriend was proving difficult. I recorded the following entry in my journal. Her voice is incessantly urging me to end my life. It reads, her voice orders me to die on a constant basis within my head. It is unclear whether this was an actual hallucination or merely a figure of speech. but it illustrates the gravity of Alexander's condition. Upon hearing the account, the friend promptly contacted the school counselor for assistance. However, following a single session, the counselor reached the determination that Alexander's condition was not severe, and he ceased seeking further assistance. Alexander and his fiancée spent the night at her dorm on May 19, 2019, the day before his graduation. And the following morning, as soon as she awoke, he was completely absent. Conversely, a text had been neglected. "I was happy to spend my last night with you." Upon recognizing the error, she promptly activated her location monitoring application. However, his GPS was deactivated. Therefore, she texts him to promptly turn it on, and he responds with an eerie tone. "I'm high up, but I won't be for long." What caused her to adopt these words? She may have thought of something ominous, but I do not believe she did. "Hey, Alexander, pleased. What do you intend to do? If you love me, please stop." Alexander's GPS activated after a brief interval, and we obtained his location. It was a structure in close proximity to the school. She had a bad feeling about it, so she hail-called a taxi and made her way there promptly. She notified the sibling of Alexander. She contacted assistance. She hurried to the rooftop upon her arrival. But it was already too late. Alexander had commenced the act of self-immolating. This is the contents of his final text message to his fiancée. "I love you. This isn't your fault. It's all my fault." As soon as the investigation into Alexander's murder commenced, prosecutors ceased to view it as an act of volition. She was accused of manslaughter in relation to the act of driving him to his demise. This is one of those situations in which establishing cause and effect is extremely difficult. The police noted, however, that Alexander had no history of depression or mental illness prior to beginning a relationship with you, and that you threatened to murder Alexander in over 47,000 texts sent over the course of 2 months. The court deduced that the victim's psyche had been impacted by her relationship. I then proceeded to trial with you. Yu's texts, according to her defense, were merely an adolescent exchange between a young couple, and Alexander was old enough to disengage from the situation on his own accord. Additionally, the defense attempted to cast blame on him for failing to terminate Yu and Hyung's communication. What was the final verdict in the trial? Yu was convicted of negligent murder. While no physical aggression transpired between the parties, the court acknowledged that Alexander endured emotional abuse at his hands. 2.5 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and 10 years of probation comprised his sentence. Since Yu continues to assert that his companion has passed away, it is unclear why he ought to be held responsible. A young man who had a bright future at a prestigious university committed suicide as a result of his girlfriend's continual verbal abuse, obsession, and control. This is the most shocking aspect of the case. One could argue that the victim lacked the necessary determination to commit suicide. But once upon a time, Alexander placed the utmost trust in and cherished his fiancée to the extent that he cherished his family. She is the one who has repeatedly criticized him and stated that she would rather be deceased than with him. Who can say what the outcome would be if we were in an identical circumstance? We cannot therefore place the responsibility on anyone else. Gaslighting appears to occur more frequently with increasing proximity to the victim. It goes beyond the observable injuries. Furthermore, I believe it is criminal to harm, corrupt, or dominate the other person's psychology. In situations characterized by fear or isolation, it is of the utmost importance to seek assistance. In the interim, HorrorTube, your gratitude is appreciated.